Story 1. The service door. Sometimes the scariest doors aren't the ones locked to keep us out, but the ones someone is desperate to push open from the other side. 1:12 a.m. I was the only one left on the platform. The last train had gone 20 minutes earlier, and the overhead speakers had already clicked into silence. Fluorescent lights buzzed above me, but most of the station was sunk in shadow. I told myself I didn't mind the wait for the night bus. Still, the emptiness pressed in, louder than the hum of electricity. That was when I noticed the service door. Metal, dented, a little off its hinges, tucked between two vending machines. At first it looked ordinary, but then I saw the handle twitch. Not once, over and over, jerking as if someone inside was testing it. I froze with one foot on the yellow line. Service doors don't open onto platforms. Not from the inside. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe a janitor had stepped into the wrong corridor. Maybe the draft rattled the latch. But then came the sound, scraping like metal dragging on concrete. It rose and fell, irregular, followed by something heavier. Breathing. Wet, deliberate, too close to the door. My mouth went dry and I shifted my weight, careful not to let my shoes squeak against the tiles. The platform stretched empty in both directions. No footsteps, no announcements, nothing to anchor me in normality. Just that door, rattling in small bursts as if something behind it was restless. I wanted to glance at the stairwell exit, to remind myself there was a way out. But my eyes wouldn't leave the handle. It twitched again, sharp, purposeful, like a pulse I couldn't ignore. I told myself to move, just walk up the stairs, leave the station, wait in the open air. But the moment I shifted, the sound changed. The scraping turned to pounding, like fists striking from the other side. The handle shook harder, metal grinding against its lock. It wasn't someone trapped, calling for help. It was force. Pressure. A demand to get out here, onto the platform. My body leaned forward even as my brain screamed retreat. I noticed details I shouldn't have. The faint smear of rust around the hinges, the way the vending machine beside it vibrated with every strike. My chest tightened with every thud. Whoever was behind there was strong. Too strong. And I was the only witness. I reached for my phone, though I already knew there was no signal this deep underground. The screen glowed pale against the tiled wall, useless, but I held it anyway, like a shield made of glass. Another slam rattled the door, and this time the lock itself groaned. My stomach twisted at the thought of it giving way, inch by inch, until nothing separated me from whatever pushed behind it. Then it happened. The metal creaked, hinges straining, and the door shifted outward. Just a fraction. Enough for air to slip through and brush my face, damp and sour, like a cellar that had been sealed for years. And in that sliver of space, a hand shot through, pale, grimy, fingers spread wide, groping for the edge. I stumbled back, the phone slipping in my hand. The fingers clawed at the metal frame, nails scraping, leaving thin trails of dirt behind. They weren't trembling. They were steady. Testing. The hand pulled, and the gap widened with a low shriek of the hinge. That was when I realized he wasn't trying to get out. He was trying to drag the door toward me. Outward. Onto the platform. My legs locked. Every instinct told me to run, yet I stood there watching the door bend under his grip. The chain on the lock rattled, links straining against each other, one more tug away from snapping. The sound filled the whole station, echoing against the tiles. I could hear his breath now, short and sharp, almost excited. "Would you push it shut?" The clatter of boots echoed down from the stairwell. Security at last. I shouted, voice breaking, and in that instant the hand slipped back into the gap. The door slammed shut so hard the vending machine shuddered. By the time the guard's flashlight beam cut across the platform, only the dented metal remained, hanging ajar. He muttered something about kids messing around, but the chain on the lock told another story. It dangled twisted, half-broken, one pull from giving way. I didn't argue. I couldn't. The guard swept the corridor beyond, but there was no one, nothing. Just that smell, sour and heavy, leaking through the crack. I never took the subway that late again. Yet sometimes, passing a station at night, I catch myself scanning for service doors, waiting to see if one moves. Story 2. The vending machine stalker. At 0:47 a.m. on an empty subway platform, a vending machine gave me something I never paid for, something that knew my name. 0:47 a.m. The platform was empty except for the flicker of a fluorescent light and the low hum of the vending machine across from me. I hadn't planned on staying this late, but the last train was running behind, and silence pressed in heavier with each minute. That's when the first soda can dropped. No coins, no one near the glass. Just a sharp clatter in the stillness that made me jump. I thought maybe the machine had glitched, some random mechanical hiccup, until I picked up the can. The tab was bent as if someone had already touched it. And wedged beneath the lip of the wrapper was a slip of paper, folded small. My initials. Handwritten. I froze with the note pinched between my fingers. The air felt colder than before, though the heater vents still hummed somewhere overhead. I scanned the platform, rows of benches peeling ads, the dark tunnel swallowing the rails. No movement. No one. Just me holding proof that someone knew I'd be here. I told myself it had to be a coincidence. Maybe another passenger shared my initials. Maybe the can had been tampered with days ago. Still, I couldn't bring myself to drink it. I set it down on the bench beside me, and that's when the machine groaned again. A packet of chips slid into the tray, this time with today's date written across the foil in the same narrow handwriting. The date wasn't printed like an expiration label. It was written in pen, the ink bleeding slightly on the glossy surface. I gripped the bag, my palms damp, and checked the far end of the station again. Still empty. But the feeling of being observed crawled up the back of my neck, like eyes pressing between my shoulder blades. I thought about leaving. Just walking up the stairs and waiting on the street, even if it meant missing the train. But some stubborn part of me wanted to understand. Machines don't choose. They don't know your name. They don't mark the date. And yet, when the third thud echoed, I knew it was deliberate before I even reached for the tray. A folded square of paper waited inside the tray. No snack this time. Just the note. My hands trembled as I opened it. 4 words. Written sharp, rushed. Turn around. Every instinct screamed not to obey. The tiled wall in front of me suddenly felt safer than whatever stood behind. I listened instead. Nothing but the hum of the machine, the crackle of an old speaker, and the faint drip of water echoing down the tunnel. Silence, yet thicker now, like it was holding its breath. I couldn't help it, I turned. At the far end of the platform, just where the overhead light failed and the shadows began, stood a figure. Too far to see a face. Too still to be casual. My chest tightened as I realized they were standing completely outside the glow, as if they'd chosen that precise distance to remain unrecognizable. I called out, my voice breaking the silence like glass. No answer. The figure didn't move, didn't even flinch. I stepped back toward the machine, my shoes scraping the tile, too loud, too exposed. Then, as if on cue, the vending machine whirred again, but this time nothing dropped. Only the sound, grinding like a throat clearing. I bolted when the train's lights finally broke the tunnel. The figure stayed rooted in the dark as the rush of air filled the platform. I jumped aboard and pressed against the window, trying to keep them in sight. But the moment the doors closed, the spot was empty, no one left standing there. Just the vending machine glowing faintly in the silence I was leaving behind. Would you look back? The next day I tried to laugh it off. I even told a guard, who humored me enough to check the security logs. He came back pale, muttering something about the machine being restocked earlier, but not by anyone on record. No footage. No signature. Nothing. I've avoided that station since. Still, sometimes late at night, I hear the sound of a can dropping on tile, and I swear it carries my name. Story 3. The public phone trap, 12:30 a.m. The last train gone. An empty platform. And a payphone that shouldn't have been ringing at all. It was 12:30 a.m. when I realized I was the only one left on the platform. The last train had already screeched past, leaving behind nothing but the echo of its wheels and the sour smell of burnt metal. That's when I noticed it, a payphone at the far end of the station, its receiver swinging slowly, back and forth, back and forth. No wind, no reason, just movement that shouldn't have been there. I don't know why I walked closer. Maybe because the sound was faint but insistent, a soft creak of the cord, the tap of the receiver against the booth. The fluorescent light above it flickered as I approached, casting the phone in sharp, ugly flashes. My chest tightened. Payphones weren't even supposed to work anymore, not here. Yet this one looked like it had just been used. The plastic was warm when I brushed it with my fingers. I leaned in, telling myself I'd just glance at the receiver, nothing more. That's when I saw it, a yellow sticky note pressed neatly against the plastic. My name, written in thick black ink. Not just my first name but my full name, the way it would look on an official form. My stomach dropped. No one should know I'd be here. No one should know this much. I froze, my breath clouding faintly in the stale underground air. For a second I thought maybe it was some twisted coincidence, some other person who shared my name. But deep down I knew better. The pen strokes were deliberate. The letters sharp, almost carved into the paper. It was meant for me, and whoever left it had been waiting. I pulled my hand back like the phone had burned me. The receiver still swayed, bumping softly against the booth. That dull, rhythmic sound echoed louder than the hum of the station lights. I told myself to just walk away, head upstairs, call it a night. But as I turned, something on the glass of the booth caught the corner of my eye. Scratched into the inside panel, just faint enough to miss if you weren't looking, were words. Long, jagged strokes carved straight into the plexiglass. "We've been watching you since Tuesday." My throat tightened. Tuesday? That was 3 nights ago. I replayed the week in my head, where I'd gone, who I'd seen. And then the weight of it hit me. Whoever wrote this hadn't just known my name. They'd known my routine. The platform suddenly felt too big, too empty, every corner stretching into darkness. I tried to convince myself it was some prank, something left for anyone unlucky enough to stumble across it. But then I noticed the smear of fresh marker ink on the letters. The message wasn't old. It had been written recently. That's when I saw movement at the far end of the platform. A figure, standing still just beyond the reach of the flickering lights. Too far for me to make out a face, but close enough that I knew they were looking directly at me. My skin prickled. They hadn't moved when I turned toward them. They were already facing me, waiting. The receiver bumped the booth one last time before I grabbed it. The plastic was slick, almost greasy, and the faint smell of copper filled my nose. For a heartbeat I thought I heard a low breath on the other end, but the line was dead. No dial tone. Just silence, stretching so long it roared in my ears. My hand shook as I lowered it, afraid the figure at the platform's end would somehow hear it too. I glanced back and my chest locked up. The figure was still there. Same posture. Same silence. But now they were closer, a step inside the light's reach, their shadow stretching unnaturally long across the concrete. I wanted to scream, to demand what they wanted, but the words lodged in my throat. A single thought pulsed in my head, relentless. "Would you pick it up?" I stumbled back from the booth, my shoes scraping loud against the concrete. The figure didn't follow. They only stood there, breathing the same stale air I was trapped in, watching. I forced myself toward the exit stairs, each step heavy, the buzzing lights above threatening to blink out. I didn't look back again until I was at street level, where the night air hit me like cold water. By then the platform was empty. Later, when I couldn't sleep, I pulled up the station's live camera feed. The footage showed the phone booth clearly. At 12:28, the receiver began to sway, though no one was there. At 12:29, a shadow filled the booth, head bent toward the glass. By 12:30, I appeared, walking into frame. The shadow was already gone. "Please, Tell me I wasn't the only one who's seen this. Story 4. The escalator watcher. They say empty stations are safest after hours. But at 1:03 a.m., I learned the silence of a subway doesn't always mean you're alone. 1:03 a.m. The station should have been dead quiet. Last train long gone. Lights humming low on backup power. Yet the up escalator kept moving, steady as if nothing had failed. Signs taped to the rail warned out of service, power down. Still, I heard the hum under the silence. I'd stayed too late at the office again, dragging myself through empty platforms, head buzzing with exhaustion. No cleaners in sight. No late drunks. Just me and the mechanical steps rising into a dim exit tunnel. The other escalator was frozen stiff, exactly like you'd expect in a blackout. But this one didn't stop. I paused at the base, hand on the cold rail. The sign crinkled against it, edges curled from tape losing grip. The letters were thick black marker, uneven like a rushed warning. But the machine didn't care. The steps kept folding upward, carrying nothing into the faint glow at the top. The sound was wrong too, not sharp, not metallic, but a low mechanical breath. I told myself it wasn't strange. Maybe the escalator was wired differently, maybe a separate circuit. Yet the more I watched, the less it felt like convenience and more like insistence. A steady pull upward, daring me to take the ride. My chest tightened the way it does before a panic spike. The silence of the station seemed to bend around that sound. Halfway up the moving steps, I saw it. A single shoe riding the escalator like a passenger. Brown leather, scuffed at the toe, the kind older men wear with suits. It tipped sideways with each groove, carried slowly toward the exit. My first thought was someone lost it running for a train. But the leather was damp, streaked with fresh mud. Still wet. I scanned the floor around me, expecting to see its pair abandoned nearby. Nothing. Just the glossy tiles, reflecting weak strips of emergency light. The smell of damp earth carried faintly down the tunnel, sharp against the usual metallic dust of the station. The shoe kept gliding upward, too steady, like the escalator wanted me to follow it. The steps carried the shoe into the glow above, and that's when I froze. At the top, just where the light spilled down from the street exit, someone stood. A tall outline against the glare, perfectly still. I couldn't see a face, just a black shape framed by the glow. No sway, no fidget, not even the lift of a breath. My throat went dry. I told myself it was a security guard, but guards move, guards look around. This figure didn't. It just watched, locked in position at the end of the climb. The shoe reached the landing and toppled sideways near its feet. The figure didn't react. Didn't even glance down. Then it moved. Not forward, not away, down. One slow step after another, pressing against the rising machine. The escalator carried upward, but the figure resisted, closing the distance with deliberate weight. Each footfall echoed faintly as if the steps themselves groaned under it. I felt my knees lock, torn between running and freezing. The rail trembled under my grip as if sharing the strain. I whispered to myself it was nothing, just a trick of light, but the outline kept lowering, one careful step at a time, steady against the pull. My chest thudded so hard it hurt. Would you climb up? I couldn't. I couldn't even lift a foot onto that moving steel. I backed away step by step, until the humming softened into the distance. I didn't run. I couldn't take my eyes off the figure pressing downward, slow and patient, as if it had all the time in the world. I slipped out through a side stairwell, heart pounding in my ears, and never looked back to see if it reached the bottom. The next morning, news scrolled quietly across a screen in the office break room. Station escalator locked, out of service. Maintenance reported no malfunction. I went back that night to check, against every instinct. The machine was dead still, chained at the base. No shoe on the steps. No figure at the top. Just silence that clung too close. And now, every time I hear that low mechanical hum, I swear I feel eyes waiting above me. Story 5. The clock that shouldn't be right, 12:58 a.m., silent subway platform, and the timetable showed a train that shouldn't exist. Someone behind me whispered, "That's your train." It was 12:58 a.m. when I checked the timetable above the empty platform. The screen hummed faintly, a bluish glow against the concrete walls. It showed the usual nothing, just a reminder that the last train had already gone. Was ready to give up and call a cab when the display flickered. The letters shifted, scrambled, and then cleared. A new line appeared. 105, local service, track 2. I froze. That train hadn't run for months. I knew because I'd missed it before, and the station workers told me it was permanently canceled. My eyes burned from staring too long at the screen, but the numbers didn't change. 105. 7 minutes away. The platform was silent except for the faint buzz of the fluorescent lights. My chest tightened in that way it does when something feels off but you can't explain why. A voice broke the silence. Low, close, just behind me. "That's your train." The words made my skin prickle. I hadn't noticed anyone else on the platform. I turned slowly, trying not to look startled. A man stood a few steps back in the shadow near the vending machine. His jacket looked too heavy for the season, zipped all the way up to his throat. I couldn't see his eyes clearly, but I could feel them fixed on me, unblinking. I cleared my throat, forcing a thin laugh. "That line's canceled. Been gone for months." My voice sounded too loud in the hollow station. The man didn't move. He tilted his head just slightly and repeated in the same low whisper, "That's your train." The timetable flickered again as if answering for him. The other lines blurred for a second, leaving only that single entry, 105, track 2. My stomach turned cold. I glanced toward the far end of the platform, half expecting to see a conductor step out or at least the red blink of a signal light. Nothing. Just concrete, rails, and silence. When I looked back, the man was closer. Not much, maybe 2 steps, but I was sure he hadn't made a sound. His shoes were wrong for silence, scuffed leather with stiff soles. He lifted a hand and pointed toward the darker half of the platform, where the lights buzzed but didn't fully reach the tracks. "You should be waiting over there," he murmured. I shook my head, backing away a step. "I'll wait here," I said, trying to sound steady. My hand brushed the cold metal bench behind me. The man didn't argue, he just smiled, a slow curve that didn't touch his eyes. He kept pointing, arm rigid like a broken compass stuck in one direction. A faint sound carried down the tunnel then. A horn, long, low, and impossibly distant. My chest tightened. For a moment I wanted to believe. Maybe there was a special run I hadn't heard about. Maybe I wasn't alone at all. But when I looked up at the timetable, the numbers glowed too perfect, too bright. 105. On time. The man began walking, slow and deliberate, toward the dark stretch of platform. His footsteps echoed louder than they should have in the empty space. He didn't look back, didn't check if I was following. He simply moved as if it was understood that I would. The air seemed heavier near the tunnel, carrying the smell of damp concrete and something faintly metallic like rust or blood. I stayed rooted in place, every muscle tense. Then the horn came again, closer this time, rattling the rails under my feet. But no light appeared, no rush of air through the tunnel. Only the man, now standing at the edge, leaning forward slightly as though he could already see the train gliding in. My breath caught. "Would you follow him?" I grabbed my bag and turned away. My legs felt shaky, but I forced them toward the exit stairs. Behind me, the horn roared one last time, impossibly close. So close I swore I felt the vibration in my teeth. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see if the man was still standing there, waiting for me to step closer. Later, when I searched online, I found a local forum. A short post buried in the archives. "Does anyone know what happened to the woman who vanished last Friday? She was last seen at the station, around 1 a.m. My hand trembled on the mouse. Same time. Same place. I can't stop asking myself, if I had stayed, if I had followed him, would anyone be searching for me right